Now, you may recall in earlier episodes, I talked about a V2 test site up here in Austria, not far from Ebensee. Figuring this was an important part of Kammler's research, whether it be for rockets or jets or nuclear, it had to be delivered somehow, so the V2 had to be perfected. And I figured I should go have a look so I could show you all. But this was not the walk in the woods I thought it was going to be. And what I found up here, I promise you, is not something you will ever see intact again anywhere else, and you've probably never even seen photos of this place, nor will you be likely to do so in the future. I was informed there's a V2 rocket test site in these woods. I can't find any kind of military production capacity anywhere near here, which makes this interesting. If there's something in here, that really does give you an indication that in every small hamlet of woods, you have no idea what's hiding. There's this old barbed wire fence. That looks like an air intake. This is like walking up through a prison camp. I don't think they mean business here. A lot of these little air intakes. That means there's a lot of underground bunkers. There's a very serious looking piece of factory down there that I absolutely cannot tell what does. Something's going on in here underground in this nondescript place that was just supposed to be an old rocket test engine. What the hell is going on in here? But somebody is guarding this place. Kind of like to know who. Now, as you all know, I am not one who enjoys being kept outside the fence. So that gave me an excuse to go back to my favorite hotel up here in Austria and eat some more schnitzel, and made a whole lot of phone calls to try to get myself in a legal way beyond the fence with a camera. Because what is in there is the last remaining V2 test stand of the war. And I had to show you. And it really is with a heavy heart that I have to leave the Auerhahn. But now I have to go look at something that's very important and very hidden, and I can't even tell you where it is. And unfortunately, I actually cannot tell you where it is. Some of you may know or have heard of it, but please keep it to yourself. There's a whole lot of dangers involved in this particular area, and we do not need any more strays jumping the fence getting hurt. As the Allies' bombing campaign over Germany intensified and more industry had to move underground, on September 1943, the SS made the decision to take over the cellars of an old brewery and its underground storage tunnels near Ebensee. They were going to use these for the V2 rocket engine testing and for the production of liquid oxygen as well. Of course, the project was placed under the command of SS General Hans Kammler, and the planning of the tunnel system was assigned to the engineering office of Karl Fiebinger. The local Gauleiter, August Eingröben from the SS, was personally involved in the decision to move the V2 testing here, and Hauptsturmführer Buchmeier was put in charge of running the project. A separate labor subcamp was set up mid-October in order to advance the construction works as quickly as possible. To camouflage, the plants and the bunkers were spanned with nets, and all the buildings were painted black. The project name was Steinbruch Verwachtung GmbH. In beginning of October 1943, the SS transferred the first prisoners here to build the subcamp, to enlarge the tunnels and construct the huge test bunker itself. They expanded the existing tunnel system and dug additional tunnels. They constructed a 1.6 kilometer long rail siding also. The engine test stand stands at 12 meters tall, 20 meters wide, and 35 meters long. It is massive. Huge vents were funneled underground to above ground for the rocket exhaust, and a 60-meter deep elevator shaft had been sunk from the test stand down to the production plant in the dugout tunnels below. Here they established the liquid oxygen production in a huge 60-meter tall underground cavity connected with the tunnels. It was codenamed Rela X. Also, construction of a large transformer bunker for the 80-ton transformer had been built off-site to provide enough electricity for the fuel plant. With a 3-meter thick roof, it resembled that from the Wolf's Lair. However, this one was disguised as a hayloft. Now, the main task of the so-called Vorwerks was to test individual engines of the V-2 rockets. For this purpose, they were subjected to a 60-second burn test. These were extremely loud and did not go unnoticed by the population surrounding. Between 1,000 and 1,500 prisoners worked here at the height of the production. There was SS guards, engineers, skilled workers, employees and external companies working here. Several SD officers and one Wehrmacht unit was housed at the site and in the surrounding area to secure operations. One of the rocket scientists stationed here was Hermann Oberth's youngest daughter Ilse. Of course, also von Braun would visit periodically as testing got underway. This is really impressive. This is so much larger than von Braun's last test stand he had at Kummersdorf before he moved to Peenemünde. And don't worry, we went to Kummersdorf. I filmed it and I'll show it to you soon. Just take my word for it. This is so much more impressive and larger. This is also the latest and most modern of the V-2 rocket test stands that was built during the war. After the last explosion, there's very little left of the control room to the left side on the test stand. It was from here that the rocket tests would be run and partially monitored. There would be cameras placed on the opposing side for closer monitoring. There were 2 testing chambers in the structure. Fuel, air, oxygen, power would come up through the shafts and pipes to the control bunker and to the test stand itself. On February 29, 1944, a large explosion occurred. 14 people were killed. Numerous installations were destroyed. And according to Gauleiter Eingruben's report to Albert Speer, the accident was over a leakage of liquid oxygen and through an open carbide lamp, which the foreman carried with him at the plant. The Gestapo examined this matter more closely as a relic of sabotage, but in any case, the liquid oxygen production from this explosion was halted almost 2 months. By the beginning of 1944 May, the specialists had completed in reinforcing and repairing the destroyed lines and systems, and the first engine tests of the V-2 rockets were carried out. The engines were checked and the pressure as well as a thrust measurement in order to increase the burn times for a certain range was determined. However, on August 28, 1944, at 12:29 p.m., another accident occurred. A very serious explosion. 25 people were killed, including Hermann Oberth's daughter, Ilse, who was only 20 at the time. 11 of the bodies were so burnt they could no longer be recognized, and human remains were found hanging from the trees far from the test stand. Again, the Gestapo investigative sabotage was involved, but none could be established. Regardless, no more testing could be done at this site, although the oxygen continued to be produced until the end of the war. You can get up on the roof from the backside of the bunker, and there's not much left up here but the remains, and there's a small pillbox that served as a shelter for the anti-aircraft crew that was stationed up here. It's only one door and well built. You can still see remnants of the black paint. One thing that's a little different than what you would see on a regular Regelbau or regular bunker on the east wall or even Hitler's headquarters are these very heavy steel pillar mounts from which the camouflage netting would be hanging. And these are still original. There actually was a little fence surrounding the rooftop, which is probably a good thing with a 30-meter drop down. It is to be said that this site was never actively bombed or attacked by the Americans or British Air Forces. Whether this is because it was so well camouflaged and top secret they didn't know about it, or because it did the Allies the favor of constantly blowing itself up, is still an unknown entity. And to make it easy to mount things both outside and inside the tunnels, you have these little slits. With a groove, you could put in a screw, turn it, and easily anchor cables and what you need. To the right side of the massive bunker, there's another control house. Underneath it, there are separate tanks of liquid oxygen and ethanol. This was destroyed partially in the first explosion and then rebuilt. You can see the marks on the walls are all from the second larger explosion, from which testing never recovered. Although the entire structure actually appears to be in great shape and fully capable of withstanding more testing, in my opinion, there was just not enough time of the war left to rebuild it. From the small room here, the test would be observed and filmed through armored glass. The jet engines would be sent up from below and suspended here from the ceiling, so the thrust would be vented down and outwards through the angled pits. And here was a port for another armored window, and a back room for more controls. In this room was the original elevator shaft, and this goes without any explanation. But one can only imagine the amount of thrust that would kick out through these vents. How much noise and fire and flame that would be. It really is an amazing structure to imagine all the technology that was used here to monitor each engine tests. 500 engines were tested before they were mounted in rockets and fired towards England before the site closed down. And here you can see one of the rail lines that leads into the elevator, from which the engines would come up from down below. The original doors to this room were much wider, since the motors would come up on a small wheel transport and hoisted up under the roof. Unfortunately, this elevator shaft, being some 70 meters deep, had to be closed up because people kept breaking in, and it is quite a bit of a drop straight down. Initially, the company here tried to build another little wall wherein they could put a door they could lock to prevent people accessing the elevator shaft. However, having little luck with that, they chose to actually close off access to the shaft entirely for safety reasons. The V-2 rocket motor was the world's first large liquid-fueled rocket engine, and it also powered the first ballistic missile, the V-2. It had a thrust of 25 metric tons, that's 56,000 pounds. It's an interesting note that most people post-war seem to believe that the V-2 rocket was developed at, rocket speed. It actually took between 7 and 10 years of trial and error and development, and the first rocket thrust engine only had 1.5 tons of thrust. And despite the millions of Reichsmarks the V2 cost to develop and build, with a lot of errors and problems to overcome, including that the V2 rocket development program had to take a backseat to the German bomber interceptor forces, and they therefore settled on a control system that oriented the missile along a predetermined path in a vertical plane pointing to the target, instead of any kind of radio guiding control. It's also interesting that Dornberger, in his memoirs, complained bitterly that Hitler had delayed the decision of putting the V2 into production for 3 years, from 1939 to 42, which would indicate that Dornberger believed he could put the V2 into production already in 1939, and he mentions believing the war could have been won if that had happened.
Originale Sicherungskasse.
Ja, schaut fast aus. Ja, natürlich für den Bereich da.
And it must be said, I thoroughly do enjoy seeing original equipment and cabling still on the walls. But all this equipment was necessary because the V2 did have problems. One of them was it had a tendency of exploding in mid-air, which is not particularly productive, and they were still working on fixes to the missile in the late 1944 as it was already on the production line. However, as I have talked about before, the V2's targeting guidance was getting better. It was becoming more accurate, and after the U.S. Army captured the Ludendorff Bridge during the Battle of Remagen on March 7, 1945, the Germans desperately wanted to destroy it. General Kammler was there launching missiles himself at the bridge. He fired at least 11 V2 missiles. This was their first tactical use, and the only time the V2 missile was actually fired at a German target. They were actually fired from Holland, launching towards Germany in order to hit the bridge. Now, one of the missiles landed as far away as Cologne, 40 miles to the north of the bridge, but one of them came as close as 500 meters. Now, if, during the war, the guidance system had been perfected to make the V2 able to hit tactical targets, and with possibly a more than conventional warhead, it would make sense to keep the testing and production of this costly missile up. However, Dornberger complained to Hitler there was only so much that could be expected from a 1-ton warhead. However, interestingly enough, Hitler retorted that he expected far more from a 1-ton warhead, indicating something more, possibly something bigger. And if indeed what we are seeing out in Jonastal and the testing of what is possibly a smaller tactical nuclear device was in play or production or development, the V2 would make sense if it could be deployed in numbers and with a tactical warhead that would cause mass casualties amongst the enemy, and of course, if it could hit the enemy where it hurt.
Und das ist die Mauer vorne.
Ja, richtig.
Ach so. Okay.
All right, so I ran into a wall.
Davor ist ein Ausgang noch aus dem Bunker in diese Richtung auch noch nach vorne runter.
There are a few important historical locations left on this planet that signifies something far bigger. This is one of them. This is one of the test beds of what became space aviation. This is one of the last reminders of the step before the step into space, although the V2 was the very first man-made object that made it into space, officially. If I could ever pray and hope for anything, it would be that one day we would be able to fence this in further. Yes, you never hear me say that, but I would love this turned into a safe museum for people to visit and see this important place and enjoy it from a technical perspective, as well as remembering those who built it and why. The whole test stand is situated on top of a small sandstone hill, surrounded now by trees. Down a few hundred meters from the actual stand, there is the evaluation house, a barrack building where all the various test results and data were gathered. I always said that I was going to get in here somehow, and here we are. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where here is, because for a lot of reasons, and for the reason of the business that is still here, this location is going to stay with me. But I want to show it to you because it is one of the last, if not the last, test stand for the V2 rocket that still exists, that haven't been demolished, haven't been destroyed, and it is an amazing place. Not to mention the underground. Wait for it.
You see there the damages from the visitors. They broke up every lead of such.
Oh.
It's typical. They're looking for some
Entrance.
Typical damages.
No wonder you want to keep a secret.
Crazy.
Yeah. Das sieht neu aus.
Ja, das sind Wasserleitungen von den Brunnen. Man nutzt früher hat man ja auch diese Kupaturen genutzt, dass man sehr einfach
And this is why, now don't get fooled by the pipes, they have nothing to do with World War II.
No.
And this is why you don't want people just wandering around in here. Like, this thing looks like you built it yesterday. And here's the original, this is the original cables.
rounded cover.
Yeah. But yeah, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. It looks like this is new. It's only from the outside you can see this is World War II.
Yeah.
I guess if the young technicians screw up, they'll have them crawl up and down here instead of the staircase.
Yes. Alte Lüftungsschächte und
I try to break into everything here. That's why you can't have nice things, because you destroy them. Yep.
This is old ventilation holes. You will see that it's a really deep hole, so it's very dangerous for visitors. Don't.
I see it.
You can see it in this area.
Oh yeah. There's a little.
There's a really hole inside the mountain.
And someone is stupid enough to crawl in here with a rope.
Yes.
Trust me. Somebody probably already did.
They take for climbing equipment and they go down in this hole. You see there we have there Schlösser keys. They broke up
Yeah, I mean, if you put a bolt lock on there, if you come in here with all their equipment, they're going to cut that too, yeah.
and
When did this stop working?
in the 70s,
Okay.
1970s.
it was all built in sandstone, which made it a lot easier for the business to build it here way before.
It's very easy to build tanks to raise here.
Yeah.
Because the substone, the so-called shear, is very easy to move.
Yeah.
This area is the old beer cellars. In former times there were barrels inside. And they are...
Das war unter dem Krieg hier gebaut. Oh, das
Ja,
war,
das war vorher schon alles.
das war früher im Krieg. Aber hat die das benutzt?
Ja, früher war das alles Bierfässer.
Und da war Zug hier?
Nein, das waren die Kanäle.
Und die Kanäle. Das sieht aus.
Da war alles kalt, das war ein Lagerkeller. Da haben sie zusätzlich mit Eis alles gefüllt. Das ist alles vor der ganzen Erde.
Ja.
Und wir haben so gestellt.
Wow.
Da sieht man auch wo früher die Fässer rauf. Das sind die Konsolen für die Fässer. So schaut die genauso aus.
Das ist ganz schön Temperatur hier. Uns alle in rote Brick gebaut. So das ist, was ist eigentlich die Originale? Aus die 1800.
Ja, das dürfte so sein, die 1920.
You can understand why they want to bring secret research into underground places like this, since, well, it's already here.
Exakte Passierscheine gebraucht.
Ja, so von dieser Stelle hier.
Ja, richtig, da war es.
Ein Sperrgebiet in einem Stolle.
Ja. For example, there's also very for beer production.
But this was within the Sperrgebiet during the war.
Hier war ein Wasser, ein Brunnen. We must shut diesen Brunnen. Das ist ein uralter Brunnen, den haben wir zuschütten müssen. Bezüglich der Grundwasserkontamination mussten wir das alles aufschütten.
Ja.
Zubetonieren mit einem Brunnen. Der Brunnen war dann die Wasserversorgung. Trinkwasserversorgung.
Und ihr macht immer noch die Bier von diesem Wasser, für die Grundwasser, oder?
Ja, freilich von Berg. Ja. Das ist ein ganz alter Brunnen, den wir haben angeschlossen.
I know, I love it. But I am kind of strange. So this... I don't see exactly how deep you are. That they made rocket fuel.
It is truly amazing to imagine that this room was almost 70 meters tall, digging down 30 meters. Of course, after the war, they covered up the floor after all the equipment to make liquid oxygen had been removed.
Zur Sauerstoffgewinnung.
Yeah. So underneath here, these
Yes.
tunnels during the war was just as deep as they were tall.
Height in the bottom.
These were enormous.
This forms is a standard form that gives a lot of
Strength.
strength.
We're back to the egg again. All the tunnels, it's all about the egg shape.
So,
That's what Schauberger said. All about the egg shape.
before we enter the room, I'll show you the entry from the rocket engines.
Okay? Yeah. Do I sound excited? yes. That's a whole different animal here, isn't it?
Die Raketentriebwerke sind von hier angekommen. Das ist sogenannter Schutzbau.
Aber diesen Teil hatte die unter dem Krieg gebaut dann. Oder war das auch original?
Ah, das war Krieg.
This is enormous. This is really, 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 really large.
The train comes, the rocket engines comes on this direction from the train. Sogenannter Schutzbau, der ist bombensicher gebaut.
Yeah, this is heavy duty. So it actually, so the tunnels go all the way up to above ground, and then you had this. What are these? Why are there indents on the walls there?
I think this was for metal constructions.
Oh, for turning. So this is nice. You're using this for business, and you're not destroying it. I am a big fan of the not destroying it part, and I'm going right in here.
A second chance for this building.
I know. I mean,
for the Wächter, this was an area.
Oh, this is what was
entry.
The check-in. It's very seriously well built. The door looks original, which is absolutely awesome.
And then the rocket engines come with the wagons. And the combination between second World War construction and an old brewery cellar.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're really right here. Oh, that's interesting. This is a connection we've seen before. And he would turn into World War II.
This is the Keller 17.
Yeah.
Cellar 17. See there the border, or this area. This is the old brewery, and then the structure for the bunker.
You see the rebar sticking out?
Yeah.
Now, I couldn't help but to notice that there is somewhat of a large hole right here.
And let's go to the
What is this? What happened here? Is that just a corner, or?
Yes, was broke out because they have die ganzen Maschinen rausgebracht.
Oh, that's when okay. When they removed everything after.
Yes.
It's always interesting how they get things into tunnels that you can't get out.
It's easy to do. Well, it was not easy to do.
They were very talented. But it also shows how thick the building is, if you can take the corner.
It will bring out some tanks, but now we go to the Wehrmacht, to the Schlier, to the SS bunker area.
Yeah. New wall, I guess. This is the top of an egg.
This is 722. And you see that this was a cooling water Stollen. Diesen Bereich wurde das Kühlwasser bezogen für die Sauerstoffproduktion und benötigt ja sehr viel Kühlleistung. das System zu kühlen.
What is in there? Is that light or is that a daylight or what is in there?
This is daylight.
Okay, so we're still sort of close to.
I can show you. It's only daylight. And you see there the drain line, drain structure.
Mini rail?
Mini rail for the rocket engines. And you see there the construction, what I showed you on the bunker.
Yeah.
For easy fix or easy
Yes.
easy connect some pipes and so on.
Yeah, just slide it in and tighten it up.
Yes.
And then you have the pipes for the air. This is that's ventilation.
Yes.
And this is, what is that? Druckluft?
This is
Hochdruck.
high pressure. I think, but this should be water, high pressure water pipes.
Yeah, I mean it would connect down to that thing. I am so glad I stayed for this.
Some signs on the wall. This original.
Oh, and it's not destroyed, and it's not forgotten, and it's not rotting. It is amazing. I have strange hobbies. Are these post-war?
That's from a newer time.
I thought, because I keep seeing them. I keep seeing those tiles with holes everywhere, and I can't figure out when they started making them. Ooh.
This is a construction. You can see how deep such this is.
Okay, so this was, what was this, a tank?
I think this is a special place for. It was a special place for.
It doesn't look like it's been waterproofed. It doesn't look like it's water.
Yes.
So grain or solid?
Yeah. I don't know.
Ooh, and the original pipes with the original paint. When do I ever get to see original pipes and paint on these? Ooh. This is the original cables.
So this was the old construction, and this area was the so-called Pionierstollen. After the very scary accident, so diese Stollen wurden gegraben von Minöre.
Ja.
Das waren keine Häftlinge mehr, sondern das war ein Notausgang, was sie gegraben haben. Jetzt frei raus.
Yes, this, you can see this is sort of like an, okay, we have to do this.
After the accident, they dig the emergency stone.
Now all the Triebstoff was down here.
Yes.
So, well, okay, if all if all of that were to explode, I don't think you would make it down this hallway. It sounds like you're optimistic.
It's very huge hole for emergency.
It is.
You can drive there's a truck inside.
Yeah. I mean, do we know how many people worked down here?
I think nobody knows exactly.
Oh, somewhere in some archive, someone has a document that they won't share.
Now, much as I'm thoroughly enjoying the flashback to what looks exactly like the East Wall tunnels, I have to keep thinking this is several hundred meters long, and behind me was a liquid oxygen plant. This was an emergency exit. If anything started to exploding down the other end of this tunnel, I don't think anybody could run fast enough to actually make it out. But optimism springs eternal.
Miserable. Wow, this is really big for an emergency exit.
Yes.
That's strange. Unnecessary. Counter. Yes, it is.
The rocket entrance comes here, and this was the elevator up to the bunker. Meters under the bunker, and this was the elevator up to the test place for the rocket engines.
So that's the bunker, and of course you break that up. And that's the original pipes, and this is where the rocket motors would be transported up by elevator, by a huge elevator. It must have been.
Yes, I think this was a double elevator.
Yeah.
With weight and. I think they have a special look for you. You can enter this room behind this. There's a little place behind.
Yes.
Please be careful.
Will do. Hey, I'll say it on camera. If I get hurt, it's my fault. That's an interesting little room. Behind the elevator. Definitely with the original cables. And now we're really deep underground. I wonder where the red brick came from.
It's cool, huh?
Something dripped off the back of my neck.
Yeah, it's cool.
Actually, something came there. So, and that's the hole under there as well. Okay, that's where we just were. So, was this building?
I showed you this after
Yeah, they built this new to break it up.
yes.
That's what I thought.
There are bricks. I think this was the prototype for the water construction of the bunker in this area. The wooden construction, and this is the so-called Schlier. You can touch it, and this is a stone.
Sounds
very easy
absolutely.
to dig.
Oh yes, this was not hard rock at all.
And you see the construction, how they made the tunnel.
It's interesting to see the wood is still in place. Oh no, wait a minute. Did they cut this corner?
Yes.
So they left the
I
wood.
think the same reason.
To get something out. And they always build an end. There's always an end. So where did they make the Treibstoff?
Where?
Yeah.
I showed you this area, this tunnel, with I mentioned before that the tunnel was double deep. Das ist ja nicht die Originalwand, sondern das ist eine Konstruktion.
Was sind dann Stolle hier rein?
Schaut.
Ja, das ist ein
Hohlraum.
Ein Hohlraum. Das ist, wo die Gold zugießt.
Ja, genau. Hitlergold.
Ja.
Hitlergold.
Eigentlich wäre das Bormann Gold.
These tunnels are still full of remnants from the war, of original equipment and signs, markings on the wall, holders for cables and pipes. And they really do reminisce that of the east wall, even that of the dead ends that could later be expanded if there would be a need for such. But now, having spent quite a bit of time in X-shaped tunnels built by the Germans ever since 1895, there's one thing I know. There's something missing. The underside of the egg. Usually, that would be turned into a technical tunnel if the one above is not. Since I'm walking on the one above, I'm thinking there must be an underside where at least technical cabling or pipes would run, and that's what I'm looking for now.
I like it original.
Can you look the inside?
Oh, you did right, we can.
You can. I don't know. What's behind it? I don't know. I'm not a forscher. I'm not a.
Okay, so here's
Yes,
das.
it's true. There is a sound behind.
There is a technical tunnel underneath. That's been bricked up for some reason. There is, all the way under. There's a technical tunnel that leads all the way. It could be...
Be careful of your head.
There's nothing in it that I need. I need the camera to work. My head, not so much.
I don't know. Yes, but this is a newer pipe. The pipe. I think they used the old hole.
I think they did. For the new pipe, they would have to. Yeah, because it's bricked up right there. So, if I'm right,
I never seen this place.
about 10 meters.
Can you see anything? 10
There's 10 meters and then there's a wall.
Okay.
And then the pipe goes through the wall.
Okay, maybe there's only blocked.
It's very nicely built. It looks like it's original, but there's also some cross pipes here. And here's the other, I can see, and here's the hole through the tunnel, where I see you, well, almost. And there's that hole, you see this?
Okay.
Goes to here. There's a red brick wall here. So that tunnel would continue that way. And there's some, holy shit, there's some really...
The cooling water transport.
Listen, this is some of the really thick cables, electrical cables that ran in this pipe that came from where you are, that came through here. These are really heavy. They're 4, 5, 6 centimeters thick.
It could be the electrical installation for the separator.
I mean, electric must have been used for something. And it's very nice and dry. I'm just wondering if there's going to be another cross tunnel here. And there is a cross tunnel that's collapsed with sand. So, and this pipe is new. And I'm turning around, and there's tile too. Now, yeah, this is the old construction, but the sand have sort of collapsed And I think there's something, I think there's a little room behind it, but I mean, all technical.
I think that drill was the places, huh?
I think so. But I kept thinking that underneath that tunnel there would have to be.
Nobody was there behind.
Well,
Last 30 years or 40 years.
I'll send you the video.
Very interesting.
It is. So you have these. Oh, so you have these, and they are running under the floor. So there is a technical tunnel underneath.
Okay, I don't know. I haven't noticed.
Well, I know that they always build an egg. All the tunnels are always built in an egg shape,
Yeah.
so there has to be something underneath. This is interesting. There's okay. Holy shit. There's a big ass room in here.
Yeah. Yes. There's a room inside.
There, of course, I can just look through the door.
Should be I think this. If there is a big, huge cables, there could be electrical.
That looks like a generator mount.
Yes.
There's something there.
Or it's for pumps to transfer the cooling water.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a generator or a power room, because you have mounts for 3 generators. You have the cable access in the floor. It could also have been compressors. I mean, but they're not very big, which is very interesting, because usually emergency generators are bigger. And this room is twice as big on the other side.
There's also a double button. So a double button, right?
Yeah, this is bigger.
Yes. There was floor. I think so.
Yep, with the technical underneath.
Very interesting.
It is, and there's a room here as well. In there's a room
Yes, and
that was bricked up.
Yes, there also.
Interesting.
Okay. This was for the cooling water.
Yeah.
It's for cooling water. This is water, river, from the river, a canal from the river.
What would it cool?
For the compressed air.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then there's the ventilation.
Yes. Cool.
This is very interesting. And you have for cables everywhere on the walls. And then
You can see there was a upper floor,
yeah.
and then you
Had
have the
cables
construction
underneath
for
as well.
cables. Oh, crazy. A lot of technical.
You're testing rockets, I mean, yeah. And then, yeah, it would make sense there would be a little generator room.
But it's all for over near 80 years
Yeah.
ago. I don't know what this is.
Clamps to hold.
I don't know. The stones. Yes, stones. Very crazy. I don't know.
Somebody will see it and they will write me and they'll tell me what it is, believe me.
I don't know for what.
That's the interesting thing. Someone will actually write me and tell me. And then I will tell you. Oh, that's awesome. So yes. That was good. I have light.
This was also, as the old man told me, that this was a collector Sammlung to the Luftschutzbunker.
Oh. So this was the Luftschutzbunker oder da war ein
Das ist eben so das Weit, das ist straight ahead.
So das ist zugemauert.
Schau, ich zeig dir. I will show you.
On May 3, 1945, the prisoners were evacuated to Camp Ebensee and liberated here a few days later. However fascinating as this V2 test site is, I now hear you ask, what does this have to do with the last Nazi secret, and what General Kammler was up to, besides, of course, running and constructing this with Fiebinger? Towards the end of the war, some very interesting events took place in these tunnels, and some very interesting personalities' careers intersected right here, just for a brief moment. It's time for a bedtime story. Operation Bernhard moved into the camp. Bernhard was the largest, now well-known counterfeiting operation of the Security Service, the SD, under Reich Main Security Office. It was in fact the largest money counterfeiting operation in history. The aim was to counterfeit the Bank of England pound notes on a massive scale in 1A quality. Walter Schellenberg, now the head of the SD, named the operation after its leader, Sturmbannführer Bernhard Kruger. Now Schellenberg is a very interesting character in the SS, and one you may not have heard much about. And generally he generated quite little interest by the Allies after the war, and was not charged with any war crimes either. Walter Schellenberg also captured the two British agents Best and Stevens during the Venlo incident in 1939. It's quite interesting that he was of no interest, because he had been in a position where he most certainly knew where most of the metaphorical bodies were buried of the SS and in the Reich. The counterfeiting campaign was personally approved by Adolf Hitler in 1942, who recommended limiting itself to pound notes as the currency for the time being, although documents such as passports, certificates, postage stamps were also forged. Now, unable to obtain qualified counterfeiters in the Reich, these were found by the SS within the camp system. 144 Jewish prisoners forged foreign currencies with the help of professional counterfeiters, especially, of course, British pound notes with a face value of 132 million pounds. The production peaked in the summer of 1943 with around 650,000 banknotes made a month. Towards the end of the war, the printing plates and remaining counterfeit money were sunk in the Austrian lake of Toplitzsee. They were partially recovered by divers in 1959, and later Kruger himself was there on hand to witness his old wartime work. Now, Operation Bernhard originally set up shop at the Sachsenhausen camp. However, towards the end of the war, it moved here, into Kammler's test tunnels, where it set up shop until the war's end. And then the Sonderkommando of forgers were sent to the Ebensee camp, where they were liberated a few days later. Almost all of them survived the war, which is something I find surprising. If this was such a secret, Why risk sending these people to general camp, where events might spare their lives, as in fact is what happened? Especially since we know some of this counterfeit money was being used to help various suspected war criminals escape. Now, also another interesting note is that the SS worked with the Reichsbank counterfeiting money far after the war was deemed lost by all, including party chairman Martin Bormann. Now remember in 1944 when Bormann had a meeting in Strasbourg where he instructed all German industries to set up companies abroad, transfer German assets to these out of Germany. Millions of Reichsmarks, patents, golds, diamonds left Germany between 1944 and 47. So would not a large number of counterfeit money aid the survival of the Nazi cause, or Germans trying to flee after the war, or those deliberately leaving in order to prepare for the arrival of these domestic assets abroad after the war was lost? Friedrich Schwendt, a heavy hitter and a very well-connected businessman who worked with the SS, exchanging forged notes into real currency, he was in charge. In fact, after printing, the money was sent to his castle in the Italian Alps, where Germans fleeing after the war also went, as Schwendt was aiding Germans escape retribution. And it gets better. Schwendt then worked for the U.S., setting up the West German intelligence networks. So what do we have? The CIA, Reinhard Gehlen, Friedrich Schwendt, and a known SS counterfeiting operation which may not have ended just because the war did. We have a setup for a post-war Nazi survival system with finances and the continued support from German industries abroad. And one of the most powerful SS generals now missing. Kammler knew of the SD operations, he knew of Schwendt and Gehlen, and he must have done a deal with Allen Dulles, whom Schellenberg also knew as he was the SS spy chief. And one other thing, Dulles also knew Schwendt, and after Schwendt went to Peru, he worked with Klaus Barbie, who worked for the CIA. And Schellenberg, he knew them all. He went free, but died of cancer in 1952. And what about Bernhard Kruger himself? Well, he forged money for the French after the war for a while, before settling back to work for the same printing press he had set up to forge the British pound note paper. And all of these fine people's paths just happened to intersect at this forgotten V2 test site. Sweet dreams, everybody. Until next week. I hope you enjoy history and military history as much as I love bringing it to you. And if you want to see more of the photos and documents I've used for these episodes, documentation and so on, you can go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out traveling around the world to some of these far-flung locations like Werner and Brauns' first test stand behind me, or Deepness nuclear reactor down there, or the Maginot Line over there, you can donate on PayPal, protection@serviceint.com. It'll be right here, and it is also on lostbattlefields.com. You absolutely don't have to, but I appreciate any help, and I love all you guys for all the support you've shown me, because history is important. We all know that, and I'm going to bring it to you.